Breakfast in Regency, England. A Regency history audioblog. Written by Rachel Knowles and read by me, Andrew Knowles. Breakfast is defined in Samuel Johnson's dictionary as the first meal. Now, I don't know about you, but breakfast was a do-it-yourself meal in my family home when I was growing up. It wasn't particularly social. We would eat at different times, still dressed in our pyjamas. But for many, breakfast in Regency, England was quite different. What time was breakfast? A Regency breakfast was normally a social occasion when all the family gathered at a specific time to eat together. The time varied from one household to another, but 9 a.m, 9:30 a.m. and 10 a.m. were common times. François de la Rochefoucauld wrote in 1784, "The commonest breakfast is at 9 o'clock, and by that time the ladies are fully dressed with their hair properly done for the day." In Pride and Prejudice, Lydia declares, "Well, and so we breakfasted at 10 as usual. I thought it would never be over." Jane Austen wrote to her sister in 1808, "It has struck 10. I must go to breakfast." This variety is emphasised in a paragraph in Persuasion which states, "The morning hours of the cottage were always later than those of the other house, and on the morrow the difference was so great that Mary and Anne were not more than beginning breakfast when Charles came in to say that they were just setting off." A social meal. In her novel Camilla, Fanny Burney has Sir Hugh come down early to breakfast on the morning after a ball, when everybody else is having a bit of a lie-in, and it becomes clear that Sir Hugh won't start eating until everybody else is at the table, which frustrates him intensely. In Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey, Catherine Morland breakfasts with the Tilneys. General Tilney feels his eldest son has shown disrespect to their guest by not turning up to breakfast on time. And in her novel Sense and Sensibility, an outing was planned, and everyone met at Barton Park for breakfast before setting out. By 10 o'clock, the whole party was assembled at the park, where they were to breakfast. The morning was rather favourable, though it had rained all night, as the clouds were then dispersing across the sky and the sun frequently appeared. They were all in high spirits and good humour, eager to be happy and determined to submit to the greatest inconveniences and hardships rather than be otherwise. While they were at breakfast, the letters were brought in. Among the rest was one for Colonel Brandon. He took it, looked at the direction, changed colour, and immediately left the room. "What's the matter with Brandon?" said Sir John. Nobody could tell. "I hope he has had no bad news," said Lady Middleton. "It must be something extraordinary that could make Colonel Brandon leave my breakfast table so suddenly." Where was breakfast eaten? In Sense and Sensibility, Jane Austen has breakfast being eaten in the breakfast parlour. The Reverend Thomas Talbot, staying with his sister at Saltram House in the early 1800s, wrote that if there were no visitors, breakfast was eaten in the Blue Bow Room. But if there were visitors, breakfast was eaten in the morning room at 10:30 a.m. Although breakfast was generally a social meal, not everyone joined the breakfast table. In Camilla, Mrs. Alvare does not join the others for breakfast. Camilla could not refrain from an eager affirmative, and the conversation was then interrupted by a message from Mrs. Alvare, who always breakfasted in her own room, to announce that she was going out lodging hunting. In Maria Edgeworth's Belinda, Lady Delacour breakfasted in her dressing room, but not always alone. "Yes, no, stay. Lord Delacour is at home. I will get up immediately. Let my lord be told that I wish to speak with him, that I beg he will breakfast with me in my dressing room half an hour hence. I will dress immediately." What happened before breakfast? Breakfast was the first meal of the day, but not the first activity. Generally, people were up for a couple of hours before they gathered for breakfast. On waking, a lady might drink a cup of hot chocolate in her room to sustain her until breakfast time. During the first hour or two of her morning, she might write letters, go for a walk, or even go shopping. In Jane Austen's Emma, John Knightley meets Jane Fairfax before breakfast, as he was returning from a walk with his little boys when it was just beginning to rain. Jane explained that a walk before breakfast does me good. Similarly, in Jane Austen's Persuasion during the trip to Lyme, Anne and Henrietta, finding themselves in the earliest of the party the next morning, agreed to stroll down to the sea before breakfast. In a letter to her sister dated 15th of September 1813, Jane Austen wrote, "We did go to Leighton and Shears before breakfast. Very pretty English poplins at 4 shillings 3d, Irish, ditto at 6 shillings, more pretty, certainly beautiful." In Sense and Sensibility, Edward Ferrars avoids being alone with Eleanor in the breakfast parlour. "I'm going down to the village to see my horses," said he. "As you are not yet ready for breakfast, I shall be back again presently." The Duke of Wellington had a habit of waking early and dealing with his correspondence before breakfast. What did they eat? The main constituent of breakfast was bread or toast and butter, with tea and coffee to drink. This could be served with marmalade and other preserves. François de la Rochefoucauld wrote in 1784, "Breakfast consists of tea and bread and butter in various forms. In the houses of the rich you have coffee, chocolate, and so on. The morning newspapers are on the table, and those who want to do so read them during breakfast." As a foreign traveller in England, Don Manuel Alvare Espriella, forgive my pronunciation, described breakfast. "The English do not eat beefsteaks for breakfast, as lying travellers have told us, nor can I find that it has ever been the custom. The breakfast table is a cheerful sight in this country. Porcelain of their own manufactory, which excels the Chinese in elegance of form and ornament, is ranged on a Japan waiter, also of the country fabric, for here they imitate everything. The mistress sits at the head of the board, and opposite her the boiling water smokes and sings in an urn of Etruscan shape. The coffee is contained in a smaller vase of the same shape, or in a larger kind of teapot, wherein the grain is suspended in a bag. But nothing is so detestable as an Englishman's coffee. The washing of our after-dinner cups would make a mixture as good. The infusion is just strong enough to make the water brown and bitter. This is not occasioned by economy, though coffee is enormously dear, for the people are extravagant in the expense of the table. They know no better, and if you tell them how it ought to be made, they reply that it must be very disagreeable, and even if they could drink it so strong, it would prevent them from sleeping. There is, besides, an Act of Parliament to prevent the English from drinking good coffee. They are not permitted to roast it themselves, and of course all the fresh and finer flavour evaporates in the warehouse. They make amends, however, by the excellence of their tea, which is still very cheap, though the ministry, in violation of an explicit bargain, increased the tax upon it fourfold during the last war. This is made in a vessel of silver or of fine black porcelain. They do not use boiled milk with it, but cream in its fresh state, which renders it a very delightful beverage. They eat their bitter bread in various ways, either in thin slices or toasted, or in small hot loaves, always with butter, which is the best thing in the country. Those that could afford it took their tea with hot milk or cream, and nearly always with sugar, at least until the abolitionist movement encouraged people to boycott sugar, which came from plantations using slave labour. Fare on offer was not always restricted to bread or toast and butter. In Mansfield Park, it appears that breakfast included eggs and cold pork. After seeing William at the last moment, Fanny walked back to the breakfast room with a very saddened heart to grieve over the melancholy change, and there her uncle kindly left her to cry in peace, conceiving perhaps that the deserted chair of each young man might exercise her tender enthusiasm, and that the remaining cold pork bones and mustard on William's plate might but divide her feelings with the broken eggshells on Mr. Crawford's. Private breakfasts. Sometimes a breakfast was held as an event, like a party. The Persian ambassador, Mirza Abul Hassan, wrote of attending a breakfast masquerade at the home of Lady Buckinghamshire in May 1810. Around 500 people were invited, most of whom came in fancy dress, and tables of food and drink were laid out in the garden. Public breakfasts. Breakfasts could also be held publicly. In Camilla, they attend a public breakfast. "Come, my girls, come," cried he, as he entered the room. "Get your hats and cloaks as fast as possible. There is a public breakfast at Northwick, and you are all expected without delay." This sudden invitation occasioned a general commotion. Indiana gave an involuntary jump, Camilla and Eugenia looked delighted, and Miss Maryland seemed ready to second the proposition. But Sir Hugh, with some surprise, exclaimed, "A public breakfast, my dear boy? Why, where's the need of that, when we have got so good a private one?" Jane Austen wrote to her sister Cassandra on the 17th of May, 1799, "There was a very long list of arrivals here in the newspaper yesterday, so that we need not immediately dread absolute solitude, and there is a public breakfast in Sydney Gardens every morning, so that we shall not be wholly starved." Breakfast for the working classes. For the working classes, breakfast fare was much the same: bread, butter and tea. This was taken part way through the morning, around 8 a.m, after 2 hours of work. The bankers and merchants would similarly stop for breakfast after a few hours' work at 9 a.m. or later. Breakfast could be bought from public houses, either to eat in or to take away. If you enjoyed this audio blog, you'll find many more articles about people, places and life in late Georgian and Regency England on our website, regencyhistory.net. There's also a growing number of audio blogs like this one and other videos here on the YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it, please give a like. Got a question? Please ask it in the comments or messages through our website. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come back soon.